Looks like they just did a deal right there.
Yeah, sure did. Looked like the one guy came up and gave him some money, and the other guy handed him a little package while they're shaking hands. Now they're separating.
These scenes are repeated daily throughout our nation, the sale of illegal drugs. The problem has grown to such epidemic proportions that drugs can be found almost anywhere.
There's probably 50 people out there throughout the night selling dope in that one little block.
Around here it's all bunk. Box. I mean, it's like baking soda, cocaine, and wax. All up, huh?
Where can you get some around?
You want to take a long hike? Yeah. Go out to Monroe and I-45.
Is it a place or are you standing outside?
Yeah, just stand around.
Monroe and I-45? Okay, cool.
What can you get around?
Whatever you want.
Police have been fighting this battle on the streets for years, but now they have a new battlefield, the residential neighborhood. These are crack houses in Houston, Texas, fortified buildings where illegal drugs are sold, standing as monuments to a flourishing drug trade. The battle against drug houses is escalating, with drug traffickers fortifying their structures to the point traditional police tactics are failing.
That's good.
Oddly enough, we found that a great deal of this fortification we were running up against was simply the result of strengthening an entry point we had made earlier. These fortifications were simply to slow down the entry teams. They didn't have any hope of keeping us out, but they wanted time to dispose of the drugs before we got in. These problems culminated with what we called the ultimate crack house. This crack house operated under the guise of a private club, and we had raided it many times. Over the years, it had developed and was now a veritable fortress. It had a steel plate door. The windows were bricked or had steel plate. Steel posts were embedded in the outer perimeter of the yard to prevent vehicle access. This location had become a symbol of lawlessness in the community. All the entry methods we had used in the past were useless on this structure. After developing probable cause and obtaining yet another search warrant on the location, we determined that the only way to gain entry would be by the use of a piece of heavy equipment to puncture a hole in the brick wall.
Police telephoned the suspects inside, had the utilities cut, and then moved in.
I got prisoners fixing to come out.
Let's go, everybody. Everybody out.
That's usually what they used to do. And I don't know what this is something new here. I don't know what that means there. That's a tally sheet there.
Ching down, it's nothing.
Another wall.
There, another wall.
That's just.
How much money was in it?
I don't know, they got amounts of 55,000, 31,000, 40,000.
Even though drug tally sheets show an average daily income of $10,000 to $20,000, raids like this one usually yield few drugs because it takes so long for the police to get inside. Because police and community leaders work so closely on the neighborhood drug problems, local residents support this type of police action.
It's difficult, for instance, to get our senior citizens to come out at night because they're afraid to leave their homes and afraid, you know, to go back after a program.
The people who are doing these things are so blatant about what they're doing, and it's almost like, well, forget you. You know, you own the property around here, but you just sit back and shut up and watch what we do. We definitely are not trying to reform anybody or try to be drug counselors or anything. We just want them to go away.
We've looked at this for at least 3 times that I can recall within the past 14 months, that they've torn the building down like this, and the result is within a week's time it's reconstructed again and it's back in operation.
Well, will it take...
This is the reality that frustrates police the most. Crack houses that were raided are repaired and operating in just a few days or weeks.
Other than the fact that I think that it ought to find that the law itself should find some way to change the law that one could not operate such a business openly, and within just a few loopholes of the law will allow them to do that. I think that should be changed. Once the law is changed, see, I have break-ins at my store too, and once they break in the store, I can look at them walking off with the item. I can't shoot them. I can't do anything, even though I know the people has broken in. The law is in their favor, and once the law continue being in favor like that, there will always be crime.
Houston Police Chief Lee Brown.
Over a period of time, as we went into the community to talk with citizens about problems in their neighborhood, the problem of crack houses turned out to be the major concern, the #1 concern in many of our neighborhoods. As a result, I formed a task force to explore what could we do to address the issue of crack houses or dope houses throughout our city. That task force has done a tremendous job in developing not only traditional approaches but also creative approaches to address the issue of crack houses. Our major concern is that the existence of crack houses in neighborhoods takes away from the quality of life in those neighborhoods. It's detrimental to people's lives there. Parents are concerned about children having to walk back and forth, and as a result, they did come to our attention as being the #1 problem in neighborhoods where they existed.
The Houston Police Department realized that traditional methods of attacking the drug problem were not effective, so new methods for solving these neighborhood problems were explored, and these did work.
Obviously, there are many hundreds of places in the city where one could probably buy crack or cocaine. But what we were concerned about were the places that are commonly referred to as crack houses. And those we defined as a building or a place that is fortified in some manner to prevent police entry or to at least slow police entry, that existed solely for the purpose of selling crack or cocaine. We found that one class of person who was profiting from the dope business were property owners. They may be, in some cases, people who were not actually in the dope business but owned a piece of property that they were renting to dope dealers and allowing the property to be used for the narcotics business. So we felt one strategy was to use existing federal laws to seize those properties and once seize the property where dope was being sold. So consequently we would have some impact against those people who were profiting from the dope business. So what we recommended in our task force report was that first we try traditional methods, and once we made a number of cases, then we would use the federal statutes that provided for the seizure of property. In order to do that, we had to go through the Drug Enforcement Administration and the U.S. Attorney's Office to begin legal procedures for the seizure and the forfeiture of the property.
By enlisting the aid of the Drug Enforcement Administration and the U.S. Attorney's Office, known crack houses were targeted for seizure by U.S. Marshals. This was done under Title 21, Section 881 of the U.S. Code.
What the Drug Enforcement Administration in the Houston Division is doing is working closely with the Houston Police Department and the Harris County Sheriff's Department in the investigation of the people running the crack houses in the Houston area and into the people that own the crack houses, own the actual property. What we're doing is seizing the property under federal seizure statutes. It's Title 21 U.S. Code, Section 881A7, which is the part of the statute that deals with the facilitation. Any property used to facilitate a drug transaction is subject to seizure and subsequent forfeiture to the U.S. government. So first we have to show that there are drugs coming out of the house and that the people who own the house know that the property is being used for that purpose. After that happens, an affidavit is filed in the U.S. courts. It could be by a DEA agent or a Houston Police Department officer. The affidavit is filed and a seizure warrant is issued, after which we go out and take seizure of the property. U.S. Marshals then take custody of that property. A warrant is subsequently issued in rem by the U.S. Attorney's Office. After that, the property goes into the federal court system, and there will be a trial or a settlement at a later date.
Hello. I'm an Assistant United States Attorney from the Southern District of Texas, here to suggest federal forfeiture as an option in dealing with crack houses. Under Title 21 of the United States Code, Section 881A7, real property used or intended to be used to facilitate the commission of violation of narcotics laws can be forfeited, provided that the crimes were committed with the notice or knowledge or consent of the owner. Now, this is an in rem proceeding, and what that means is that the property is the defendant, not the wrongdoer. It's a civil action, which means that you do not need to establish proof beyond a reasonable doubt, only probable cause to believe that the property was used illegally. Now, the way it works is that under the law, the DEA can adopt your work, present the matter for seizure and forfeiture, and then, if successful, share the proceeds of the sale of the property with you. Because there is personal liability, however, in the event that the seizure was not reasonable, you should work very, very closely with the DEA, the United States Marshals, the local Assistant United States Attorney, and you should obtain a federal seizure warrant from a magistrate. Now, I said technically that all you needed to show was probable cause. Of course, this is done through the typical ways, such as undercover purchases or searches of the property. However, practically, there are many things that you need to know and be able to show. For instance, who is the owner? Is there a lease? Who's the lessor? Who's paying the utilities? The water, the phone, the gas or electric? Are there any liens on this property? Is it really worth your while and your time to seek forfeiture? And how are you going to show notice and knowledge on the part of the owner if it's leased? Now, sometimes these houses are so fortified that if the owner is local, he can be presumed to know simply from the structural changes. But you should find out who put the structural changes in and who paid for it. You can have a conversation with the owner before seizure. Sometimes admissions are made that way. Finally, If you're not having any success, then I would suggest conducting a search, and if it shows positive for drugs, write the owner a letter. If he fails to evict the leaseholder, then you should move for seizure with the DEA. Good luck.
The role that the U.S. Marshal Service plays in the seizure of drug-related assets is that once the U.S. Attorney authorizes search and seizure warrants, the Marshal Service can assist the investigative agency in execution of the search warrant and in making arrests. And also, once this is accomplished, execution in the seizure warrant of the drug-related asset. At the time of the execution of the seizure warrant, the U.S. Marshal Service takes custody of the asset and secures it and manages the property throughout the judicial processes.
The Houston Police Department serves notice on these dope dealers that we're not going to let them build a fort and keep us out. We're going to go in. Our primary concern is the safety of the citizens, but I believe we also owe something to the citizens that live in this neighborhood and community. Whatever it takes, we're going to do to get in.
With everyone working together, this is one crack house that will never plague this neighborhood again.
How many people do you have breaking into this place?
A lot.
Like 25?
Well, I mean, I don't like to get into the numbers of how many people we use for any of our operations, but there were enough people to get in, obviously. It only took the one on the bulldozer, actually.
Houston police with a new weapon in their arsenal, a Caterpillar front loader that became a battering ram today. Good evening, everyone. Today's raid was not the first visit police have paid to that house.
Police literally cracked a suspected crack house in the Riverside area. The old house was described by neighbors as a source of crime. And while the officers used sledgehammers to smash through the wall, the others scampered through that big hole where the door used to be. Neighbors watched in fascination as officers in their blue Houston police jackets dashed around like a scene from a movie. Soon they started bringing out people in handcuffs. A woman came first, then 6 men who were searched and taken downtown and booked. Inside, police did not find very much dope at all. The place may have been a crack house, but officers didn't find very much crack. But certainly they ruined the place. It's not going to be worth much anymore, a fact that should please the folks in the neighborhood.